Okay, so welcome everybody to our May Sydney IANS gathering. It's marvelous to see you all. And this month, our featured speaker joining us all the way from the US, thank you so much, is Peter Panagore. And we're very lucky. Peter has such a beautiful voice in this space and has contributed significantly to the field and study of near-death experiences in really exciting ways. So I'm thrilled that we get to hear from you today, Peter, and hear your story, because really this is the most important thing. So Peter is a spiritual counselor, international best-selling Audible author, broadcaster, storyteller, preacher, global public speaker, community pastor, leader, teacher, writer, and two-time near-death experiencer. We could be having conversations with Peter all day long. Peter first died in 1980 of hypothermia while ice climbing in Banff in Canada. And that's one of the stories we will certainly hear about today, and perhaps we'll be hearing about part 2 as well from Peter, which was in 2015 in an ambulance having a heart attack. So Peter graduated from Yale with is that a Master's in Divinity? That one there, fantastic. And so he has a love of mystics, Western mystics, and Peter's story is going to be turned into a movie. Is that right, Peter? Did I hear that down the grapevine correctly?
Yes.
Exciting stuff. Yes. So hopefully we'll have a chance and you can give us an update as well and tell us a bit about that too. So without further ado, Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. It's, today, as opposed to this evening. It's outside of my place. The sun is setting right now. And I'm trying to put myself on speaker view. Let's see. That's all right. We'll just do that. That's good. Hi. So, yes, I died twice, and the odd thing was the second time that I died in 2015 was when my book about the first time I died was being released. I was in the hospital, and they released it early, and so calls started coming to me as I was in my hospital bed, which was this totally bizarre, unexpected thing. So I'll swing around to that. But so in 1980, I was an undergraduate at University of Massachusetts, but I was on exchange to Montana State University, which is in the western United States in the Rocky Mountains, about 2,000 miles from where I live. And I went there to escape my family. My family was in turmoil. My sister had run away, but from our point of view, vanished when I was 14, and it threw my family life into my dad was always angry and my mom was always crying for years and years and years. So I cut out to Montana to go backpacking and to go be on the National Ski Patrol, which is what I've been doing in the wintertime, working at mountains. So come springtime, March break, I didn't want to go, I'm from Boston, I didn't want to go back to Boston. Because I didn't want to see my family. So I tried to figure out how to do something else. And I went to the outdoor club where I was a member, and I found a partner, a guy named Tim, who had a complimentary set of skills, who wanted to go snow caving. He had a snow caving trip. He was looking for a partner to go snow caving in British Columbia, right over the border from Banff, which is in Alberta. And so we went snow caving. We prepped up. It wasn't my first time winter camping and backcountry skiing and mountaineering, that kind of stuff. I did that for years and years. I was a Boy Scout, all that kind of stuff. So it was a great adventure. And the last day of our trip, we were going ice climbing. We did at a place called Lower Weeping Wall, which is this world famous climb in Banff Provincial Park, which is a few hour drive from the Arctic Circle. So there was 10 feet of snow on the ground, and we parked fairly close to the climb because there's this, they call it the Icefields Parkway, runs down the spot, down this valley, more or less between the mountains. And we parked there, and we hiked in 70 yards or so, and we got to the climb. It's a 10,000 foot mountain or so. I can't remember the height, but we were only going up 500 or 600 feet. And so we were the last team arriving that day. And Tim was a lead climber, certified lead climber. I'd done rock climbing. I'd never done ice climbing. They're very similar. And I adapted very quickly. So I started to climb, but I climbed well, but I made a mistake in my equipment. I could only beg, borrow, or steal. I didn't steal anything. I should not use that sentence. I borrowed or purchased as much equipment as I could, but I came up short. I had an ice axe. You're supposed to have two. I had one, and I used an ice hammer, which was significantly shorter, not the right tool for the job. An ice axe you could plant in, let go, and dangle on a strap and put all your weight on it, so you don't have to muscle it all the time. The hammer, you put it in, you lock it in, you can't let go of it because it shuts a short handle that straps on the bottom. So if you dangle on it, it just pops out. So it was all this extra muscle power all day long to make this climb. And by the time we got to the top of the climb, the sun was setting. Because I was so slow, I had to rest all the time. The sun was setting, all the other teams had descended, and the temperature dropped 30 degrees. Boom. And we knew an hour or two before that we were going to be in serious trouble. But the trouble really became actualized because as soon as we sat down next to each other and hauled up the rope, and the temperature made us have hypothermia immediately. So I ended up in shivers. My whole body was like shaking to keep warm, and my jaw was clattering like in a cartoon. And we knew we were in serious trouble. And I should say National Ski Patrol, part of my contribution to the team, Tim and me, was my knowledge of wilderness first aid. And so I've been experiencing people with hypothermia and frostbite all winter long at this mountain where I was working. So this was like right up the top of my list. And we decided that we were in serious trouble and that we were going to die there that night unless we got off the mountain. We talked about staying the evening and snuggling up together, but the situation was too dire, and so we decided to fight our way down. And we did fight our way down with lots of trials and tribulations. And I'm going to shorten up the story here because I know our time is limited, so I can cut to the chase of what it's like on the other side. But suffice it to say that it was a 3-pitch rappel down, and it was harrowing. By the time we reached our last rappel, our hypothermia had advanced through all of the stages. My feet weren't like blocks of ice. My feet were unbendable blocks of ice. My lips were I couldn't move my lips to speak. My jaw was my jaw and my brain. I was frozen. My fingers were frozen, and I still have them all, but they're all damaged. All my extremities are damaged, and that's just the way it goes. So every time the temperature reaches a certain degrees, and I live in Fahrenheit land, so for me it's 50 degrees. It's like a let's say 20 degrees above freezing for you guys, maybe. As soon as it gets like that, I mean, I wouldn't want to estimate it, but as soon as it gets cold, everything hurts. So I'm always wearing gloves and a mask where I live because it's cold here. So we get to the last pitch, and it was a couple hours, 3 hours or so before dawn. I didn't have a watch on, and we were driving ourselves forward with all of our, I like to say, mammalian and reptilian drive for survival. And I was terrified. Okay, I should say that right up front. I was terrified of dying, but also Tim and I were super level-headed. Neither of us panicked. We knew that the desperate situation was such that we had to keep our cool, and we both did. Totally, absolutely in control of everything we could possibly be in control of, including our emotions. But we were both petrified. And driving ourselves forward for survival it was animalistic. I kept digging down inside myself to produce the energy, the physical energy, to survive, but also the mental energy to drive forward. And so we finally got to the last rappel, and now we're maybe 100, 150 feet up, and we're off of the ice and we're on ledge, and it's, I don't know, 10 hours later, some crazy thing like that. And there are iron pins into the mountain with rings on them, carabiners, nylon straps with carabiners. And so I'm hooked into one on the right side, and Tim's hooked into the one to the left. And I have the rope, and the moon has risen. Most of the night it was dark. So we're doing all of this in the dark. But the moon had risen and there was enough light to see. And I untied the rope and I tossed off the end. I kept, let me rephrase that. I tied one end of the rope to me, and I took the other end of the rope and I tossed it off around the corner, and I yanked on the rope and it got stuck. And so the situation was that Tim couldn't help me pull the rope. I could tell you why, but he couldn't help me pull the rope. So it was my job, and I couldn't get it free. And as we stood there, our hypothermia continued to advance. We'd already gone through there's this stage where you begin to lose your cognitive abilities. You no longer can think clearly or straight. You lose your coordination. And then toward the end, you get this situation where your eyes, your optics, something happens to them. There's this freezing going on somewhere inside, and you get tunnel vision, and that's what happened to me. And I was falling asleep, and I would pull myself back up and yank on the rope. The sleep is this second to last step. And this time I pulled myself up after falling asleep, this tunnel vision began. And I had never seen it before, didn't know what it was, and it just went like this to blackness. And I had been falling and smacking on the rock and waking up, because when you fall asleep, I clump down and whack the rock or wake back up, I yank on the rope. But this time, I felt myself, what I thought was going to be falling asleep, but I didn't lose consciousness. Everything just went black, and I didn't feel my body collapse. And I wondered why not. And then my vision expanded and opened, and it was all I could see was darkness, and like a dome of darkness extending into infinity. I couldn't see behind me, but I could see in front of me. And away far, far in the distance, this pinprick of light intelligence appeared at an infinite distance and rushed toward me, communicating to me telepathically, "I'm taking you." And I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. I put up all my willpower and I communicated back, "You're not taking me." And I tried to protect myself, and I was like plucked out like a flower, like a daisy, and by a child. And I was then pulled out of myself and enveloped and carried up the tunnel. But the tunnel was this infinitely wide thing and this narrow thing at the same time. It had been this infinite space, but when I was enveloped in it, I was sort of run in a direction inside the angel, I guess I could say. I was comforted, I was content, I was joyous, but I didn't know what was going on. And I just went. I felt like I was supposed to go. And the next thing I knew, I was in this infinite, eternal, illuminated darkness, and the angel had left me. And I was like floating in a place of non-being, no thing, non-being, timelessness, no DNA, no body, and I could see in every direction. So now I can see in every direction simultaneously. And my thinking feels like my seeing, and my seeing feels like my feeling. I'm all one unified being. And my first thought was, "Oh, this is who I am. How did I forget this is who I am? Now I know this is what I am. How did I think it was this other thing?" And I was completely content in this. I was alone inside of this ocean of stillness. And then there was like a And I tell this story in sequence, but there's no chronological sequence to this because it's timelessness. And so the reason why I went to Yale Divinity School, I didn't go to architecture school and graduate school to join the family business, which had been my plan since I was like 5. And so to the disappointment of my family. But I went to Yale Divinity School to study mysticism. Even though they didn't teach a degree in it, I was avoiding going into the monastery, which had become my intent. But I decided to learn as much about Western classical mysticism as I possibly could in order to learn some practices of meditation and prayer and to find my peer group. Because in 1980, I didn't have a peer group. I didn't tell anybody. I kept this a secret for 20 years. So meanwhile, back in heaven, I felt like I was an orb of consciousness, like one huge eye or 10,000 eyes, and I was alone in this space and content, and a door, and I call it a door, but it's like a portal or an opening or a gateway or all sorts of metaphors for it. But it was this opening that had another tunnel through it that extended into infinity, and it had a flowing, transparent, translucent cover over it. And I touched it with my being, and it was all living life. It was the source of all love and living, flowing, and it flowed into me. And it flowed into me and showed me all sorts of stuff all at once. It showed me love and beauty and truth. It showed me myself. I went through a hell of my own making. I self-judged. I saw my creation. I saw how the long tail of my soul, the eons and eons, everlasting long tail of my soul. I saw that I was living or had lived, because this is timelessness, other lives, but those lives were insignificant compared to the size of my soul. They were like these little tiny things compared to the length of my existence and the origin of my being. And I heard my name called, which was the unspoken. There's no language here, and there aren't even really concepts here. There's a direct experience. And so I heard my soul name called, and I was infilled with the living love. I went through a hell of my own making where I experienced all of the pain I ever gave away to everyone in my life, intentionally and unintentionally. And I experienced their pain, which it turns out was 10,000 times greater than the pain I thought that I had given them. I experienced their pain as my pain, and I experienced all of my justifications for causing their pain at the same time. So I experienced what they experienced, but it was 10,000 times greater, and I experienced my tiny, teeny little justifications for the pain that I caused. Meanwhile, I could see, to say that I could see the love is sort of a misdirection, because there's no eyeballs to see. I was experiencing the presence of the love speaking to me, saying, I made you, I love you, I forgive you. And as I went through this hell of all the suffering I gave away, and I self-judged guilty and was forgiven. And at the same time that I could see all the suffering I gave away, I also could see that all humanity was made to cause pain to each other. And it's not really our fault. We're constructed in this way. And that everything about us has always been known and always been loved. And we're really not to blame for the way that we have to be. It's the structure, not only of humanity, but of all the universe. The whole place is built the same way. It's all less than the divine. It's all limitedness. And I could see that the pains that I caused all the people in my life were no greater or no lesser than anyone else's. And I was told I'd always been known. All these things were known about me. There was nothing about me that was hidden. There was no dark corners. I was completely naked and revealed and understood and beloved and forgiven. And I was infilled with this combination of love, beauty, truth, joy, adoration, bliss, paradise, understanding, knowledge, and they weren't separate things. They were all one thing. Beauty and love were the two words that I used the most, but joy, and knowledge, anything I needed to know, and I have an insatiable appetite for knowledge. And I wanted to know about the structure of the universe from a molecular level on up. And I knew, just like, boom, I knew, I understood. Do I remember any of it? No, none of that. But I'm still a fan. So there's that. So I was infilled with this oneness of being and all the knowledge that I wanted and understood. And I then said to, I was in awe. And I felt like I could see the I guess, that I was light, a particle of light, like in God was all light. And that I had been called into being as a tiny, teeny, separate photon, wave and particle kind of thing from the greater oneness of being light. And that I was creature made by creator, and that I belonged to the divine. And I said, am I dead? And the voice without sound said, no gender, by the way. Yeah, yes, you're dead. And it's time for you to come home. And I was like, I can't come home now. My sister's missing and my parents are in pain. And if they lose me, they'll lose 2 children. And that's a terrible thing. I mean, it's bad enough as it is. And God instantly swept me through heaven to the edge of heaven, above kind of on the edge of the universe, above Earth, where I could see all of Earth holographically. This is all metaphor. So just remember, everything I'm saying is metaphor. And so I could see every single human being, 7 billion people all at once, and everyone was covered with a veil of forgetfulness, of unknowingness. And I could see what they were doing. It wasn't like a live action video. It was like having Zoom, is a new metaphor. It was like everybody has their Zoom camera on in their life, and all of their images are projected on my screen. I could see them all, whatever they were doing. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you. And now you know that my love is the most largest, infinite, eternal thing in all the universe. I am all love. And you are my beloved, and you've always been my beloved. And I felt like I was the special child, but I could see that every single person, every single human, all of the people on earth, including those who were doing dastardly deeds and at war, were all beloved children of God. All of them, everyone. There was no one excluded from the belovedness. And the voice said to me, in the same way that I love you now, I love everyone. And also I would add to my list of experiences that were unitive, were healing and wholeness. And I was healed and whole. There was nothing about me that was broken anymore. And I could see my parents' faces in particular. I could see the length of their life without me and their suffering, and I could see their current suffering. And the voice said, you now know what wholeness and healing is. And when they die, they will have that too. And you now know that the length of your human life is a wink of an eye. It's that fast. And it seems long when you're alive, but they're going to be fine. Why don't you come home? It's time to come home. They don't need you there. You can see that they're going to be healed because you've been healed. And I said, but the length of their life, it's going to be terrible for them. And I had this, had this other thing going on. I was in a nationally touring theater company based in the university. We'd been in rehearsal for months, and we're leaving on our national tour, 14 states, 24,000 miles, 64 shows, and no understudies. And the director had actually picked me up by the collar and pushed me up against the wall and said, I can't believe you're going on this crazy trip to Canada. Don't you get hurt. You have to come back. We need you. We need everybody in the show, but there were no understudies, so you've got to be here. And I said to God, I get this commitment. And God said, but it's time for you to come home. And I said, but I haven't gone to the door yet. And God said, no, you haven't. I said, do I have to? God said, I want you to. You don't have to. I said, well, if I go back to live my life, go back there, can I come back here? And God said, yes. I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And God said, you won't live your life, and sent me back. And I was crushed down to fit inside this package, this biology, and it was painful. I remember felt like I was being screwed into my body, and it hurt. My whole body hurt. I was like, I was so confused because I had pain and I didn't understand thinking or breathing or hearing or any of that stuff. I was an alien in my body and in a new world. And finally, as my consciousness, my brain came back online, my consciousness kind of activated my body again. I was being jostled and shaken, and eventually I got pulled up to my feet. It was my partner Tim screaming at me, and finally my hearing started working, and I heard him say, "You are dead, and you are dead, and if you died, I died." He's crying, and he's panicking, and I was alive. And I pulled the rope. He got me to pull the rope. He was instructing me what to do because I was lost. I was like, "Where am I? What is this thing? What is that? How does this work?" I was completely. Well, I didn't know what I was. I didn't know where I was or who I was. I didn't know anything. And I pulled the rope, and the rope came free, and we descended, and we self-treated for hypothermia in the way that you're supposed to. And a lot of other things happened that night. I left out a lot of stuff, and a lot of things happened the next night, including we got arrested, and we totaled the vehicle, and crazy stuff. And I was, when I was hitchhiking back after I wrecked the car, I was hitchhiking from Canada back to Montana. I didn't have any idea what had happened to me. I just knew that I hated being back, and that I was sorry that I made the choice, because I didn't know how much it was going to hurt. I forgot how much it hurt. And the whole place seemed to me to be ugly and flat and two-dimensional and black and white and painful and altogether undesirable. And so then we went on this theater tour. And I was supposed to be a driver for one of the vehicles, but I couldn't. I had this terrible car. We hit a semi head on, and it was underneath we went underneath the flatbed and hit the car against the wheels. I was traumatized. I was traumatized by the death, and I was traumatized by the car wreck. And I said, I'm not driving. And I developed a stutter. And this was a sign language mime theater, so I didn't stutter with my hands. And I sat in the back of the pickup truck for all 24,000 miles by myself. I took my backpacking gear with me, my sleeping pad and my sleeping bag, and I isolated myself from the truth. And because I was so lost and so alone. I knew that there was no way that I could say what I was feeling, because I couldn't even understand what I was feeling. How could I possibly? I had no language for this. I couldn't explain to people that I died, and so I dove into my meditation. I've been practicing meditation at that point for 3 or 4 years. I went to a Catholic high school. They taught meditation. Same monastery. They learned from the same monastery I was aiming toward. And how much time do I have here? How am I doing there, Nicole? Oh, good. So keep going. So I started I dove into my meditation because I figured that was the only safe place for me. And we completed this theater tour. I got back to my university that next fall. I took a mime class because I've been studying mime. And my mime teacher was in the school of Marcel Marceau, who taught yoga. And so we began every class with yoga. And in the middle of one of the classes, early on, my teacher showed us, he was also a Kung Fu, he's now like a Grand Dragon guy. But at the time he was beginning his practice of Kung Fu, and he had us form chi balls, but in a certain yoga postures, and driving our prana, or Shakti, whatever you want to call it, your Kundalini, up from your palms to your other palm, and it it just worked for me. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And so when he asked everybody in the class, did anybody feel this? I said, me. And anybody else? Nobody. So he called me up and he had me kneel in front of him with my eyes shut, and he put up his palms, and he asked me to put up my palms, and I closed my eyes, and he asked me, what do you feel? I said, I feel a swirly motion on my palms. I feel emotion on my palms. And he said, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and this is what he's doing with his hands. And I was like, what the heck is this? He said, so how long have you been studying? I said, studying what? He said, you could do this thing. How did you get to do this thing? I said, I don't know. I'm not sure. And so meanwhile, I was reading Paramahansa Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi. I read about Kriya Yoga. I had been in this monastic school of centering prayer. I don't know if you're right. So Thomas Keating's monastery was the monastery near my high school. And so I don't know, you don't know how centering prayer started, but they had studied with Sasaki Roshi, and also with the yogi from the United States and the Midwest, TM, Maharishi Mahayogi. And so they were kind of incorporating these other ideas into their meditative practice as they developed centering prayers. So I combined these things. I went to Yale Divinity School to study mysticism as an independent study under the dean, because they don't teach this there. I picked classes around the university and did independent studies with her so that I can construct a language. And then I ended up getting ordained in a denomination she talked me into. I came back with no faith, I should say that. I had been a charismatic, born-again Catholic kid, but acid dropping, pot smoking, okay? So I was just saying, okay? But I came back with no faith and no belief at all, zero. Not just not in religion, but not in culture, not in politics, not in anything. All of it is a human construct. Everything we think, even language is a human construct. We didn't even know that all the language we speak is metaphoric by nature. That's how the whole thing works. We never think about it, but but I know that God is real. I have zero doubts. The eye of God never shuts off inside me. And actually, I decided that when I learned that I couldn't run away from this, I couldn't shut this thing off, I decided the safer move was to dive into it. And so I've spent my entire life diving into the oneness of being. I haven't spent my life trying to manifest anything in this world. I haven't tried to manifest anything, nothing. What I'm after is the unitive state of being. I want that thing that I had when I was dead and more. That's my desire. My desire is to be in this where I am no more. When I was fully absorbed into the oneness of being, I still knew myself, but I knew myself in a unitive way, not in a fragmented way. I knew that I was less than creator, but I also knew that that was not the totality of the experience that was possible. This is like the edge of it. And so I want that thing. And so I hid out in the church, and I had a very trying ministry that went from everything from serving two churches that hated each other, and my job was to bring them together, to solving a major crime in the church, helping solve a major crime in the church, for which I was blamed, and then they tried to defrock me and ruin me. It was bad. My first two parishes were very hard, but we kicked spiritual ass, and we helped them find their way. And I was able to do these jobs because I worked for God. I never people. I loved the people and I served the people, but I worked for God. And because that's who I belonged to. And so that gave me sort of a freedom. I'm a troublemaking freedom person in the church. I've always had, it's been a hard fit, mostly for them, less so for me. I mean, and that's not quite true. It's been a hard fit for me too, because because I decided to use Christianity as the language of my expression. It's the cultural context. Jesus is a great teacher. Jesus was illuminated, but I am not a Christian. To be a Christian, you have to believe, and I don't believe. I know God's real. I'm a heretic by nature. I'm more in the Gnostic school. When I say by nature, I should say by supernatural, because that's where it all originates from. So I could tell you all about the crazy things that have happened. My whole life has been filled with other mystical experiences where I've been transported into the oneness of being, and lots of ways that they're going to come out in my next book. But I find that I was supercharged. I was a mystical person before this began, near-death experience. I'd had mystical experiences before. I found that meditative practices enhanced those before, and that they intensified after. And the deeper I dove inside myself, the more I was able to self-divinize, to bring light into me that isn't mine. I know it's not my light. I didn't make it. I'm just a vessel for it. I want to be in it. And so I spent my life secretly inside the church because I figured that nobody would suspect me when I was meditating all day long and practicing my secret prayer life and yoga. Plus I was practicing yoga at a time when nobody's practicing yoga. I got kicked out of the Yale library for standing on my head in a stack one day. And I was like, I'm taking a yoga break. And so I go in the stack and I got kicked out for a week, which was like torture. And so that was awful. Oppressing, the man was oppressing, it was a man, and he was oppressing my yoganess. So the deeper you go inside yourself, the more space there is for life. That's really the thing. And so I spent my life trying to help people and manifest my divine connection and nothing more. And so in 2015, speeding up ahead, so I served these churches. I ended up at a swanky community church in a yachting town where this embezzlement occurred, and all these former CEOs and executives tried to destroy me as we tried to uncover the truth of the embezzler who stole about $200,000, and they were colluding with the embezzler. So eventually one of them went to jail. It's a long story, but it was brutal. And at the end of that, I got recruited into television. And so I ended up working in a local market TV. We had 100,000 viewers a day. During the morning news, I was on to tell a sacred story. So every day I got to tell a 270-word story. I was the pastor of Maine and New Hampshire, these two states, as a broadcast storyteller, for a 91-year-old organization. And in 2015, doing that job, I took a 5K run, and the next day I had a heart attack in yoga class, and I died. And I died in the ambulance. And on the way, and I live in a very rural place, so by the time I got into the ambulance, I'd already gone through 45 minutes or an hour of my golden hour, and then I had an hour and a half ride to the hospital, to the catheterization lab. And the doctor told my son, who happened to be there, when he didn't happen to be there, he happened to be in town. He showed up at the hospital on purpose, but the doctor told him to say goodbye to me. And so he squeezed my hand and looked in my eyes and said, "I love you, Dad." And the love that was pouring out of him was so beautiful. And my wife was there, and I had told her that any chance I got to go home, I'm going. First legitimate chance I get to go home, I'm out of here. And so I winked at her and I smiled, and I knew she was going to be fine without me. She was prepared. And so on the ambulance ride, and I couldn't take any opiates, so I have no painkiller on board. I have a widowmaker heart attack, 100% blockage in one of my arteries, and that with a 3% trickle through they got to me, they gave me chemical. So I'm in the ambulance, and I'm conscious, and I'm meditating to control my pain, which I don't know if you know that about meditation, but anybody can control their pain with meditation as long as you're meditating. Pain comes back the second you stop. But as long as you're meditating, you can control your pain to a certain level. Once the brain ceases to be able to process information, you can't do it. But up until that point, as long as you can think, you can control your pain. So I'm controlling my pain. I hear the paramedics say, "We're losing him." I open my eyes, I look at her, I close my eyes, and I'm out of my body. And now I'm traveling up the tunnel, and the angel's coming toward me. Same angel, my buddy, the angel of death, coming toward me. And it's time to come home, we love you, come home. And comes to wrap me again, and I'm ready to go. And so I start to go. And then I think about my son. And I think, okay, this time I know what's going on, so I'm gonna take a moment here, and I'm gonna think about whether this is whether everybody's ready for me to go. And so I kind of turn around and I look at my son, and I see him saying goodbye to me, and I think about my daughter who had just left a difficult marriage. He had gone to Afghanistan and bad things happened, and he came back unwell, and they had a baby, and she had just left him. And so who's going to care for this baby? Who's going to be the man in this kid's life? And who's going to, if she needs protection, who's going to protect her? It's going to have to be me. And so I thought, my daughter's not ready for this. My son's not ready for this. My grandchild's certainly not. And so I turned back to the angel, and the angel came rushing back toward me. Come, 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 come. And I just turned away. And I went back into my body again. And then next thing I knew, I'm in the ambulance, and I'm getting the cath lab, and you know I don't have any painkillers on board, so they do the catheterization without any medication. So I could feel this thing snaking up in my arm and snaking into my heart. It doesn't hurt, but I could feel it in there. And the doc says you've got damage. You know, your heart's been you're outside your golden hour. You got damage. So then I'm in the hospital bed, and I find out my book, Amazon released my book early. And in 9 weeks later, I was in New York City on a national morning show, and like heavily made up, like, because I was as pale as a sheet of white paper, but I could not go. So I went, and well, then I was suddenly out nationally, and I put my career at risk for this. I put my family at risk for this. All my relationships. I mean, when I came out, the reason why I came out the first time, I told my wife the morning. In the book it says the night before, but that's not quite true. She told me after it was published. She told that it was the morning after we got married. I told her the day after we got married the truth about me, which was totally unfair. But neither of us really knew what it meant. And so then I didn't tell anybody else, but one or two, until I came out to the congregation after the embezzlement was over, and they sent a deacon to me and said, you know, we're sorry for how we treated you all those years. We had no idea. I mean, it was bad. They tried to ruin my career, ruin me personally, my career and my finances, and cast out my family, like, from society, like, so that we would end up being shunned. It was really crazy. So that they apologized, because they didn't know that they didn't know what they were doing. And you must have had a lot of faith, they said to me, to put up with us for all those years. And I'm like, I don't have any faith. So I decided that they told me that they sent an emissary, this deacon, to the pulpit as I was climbing in the pulpit to preach that Sunday morning, as the church was filling up. And I decided that day I was going to tell everybody the truth, that I'm not a believer, and everything they knew, because I trusted them now. They saw me behave over at that point, 9 years. We had relationship. They saw how my life was different than, they saw how I allowed myself to suffer in order to help solve the problem. And so I told them the story for the first time, and that's why I came out. And then when I came out with the book, my risk was even greater. And what I'm hoping is that what I think it was Neela said, or Heidi said, I think it was Neil, that now it's okay to start talking about it. Now is time to talk about it because there's a global phenomenon going on. Science is driving spirituality for the first time in the history of the world. And there are tens of millions of near-death experiences all over the globe. And as many as those of us there are who now feel empowered to speak out, driven, the most important thing I do is the same most important thing you do, Nicole. That's why we do it. I'm compelled. I'm compulsive because the moment I came back, I was told I had a message to give, but I was given no words, which pissed me off. Because how do you teach what you can't say? How do you show what can't be seen? How do you bring this thing forward? And so I didn't know how to do that. And I was pretty upset about it because the commission was so extraordinarily powerful, such a compulsion that I couldn't control it. I locked it down. I couldn't stop it on the inside, but I stopped myself from speaking it out loud. And until I could figure out a way to talk about it. And then now I'm talking about it. And I think that the more near-death experiences to talk about it, the more the other people who have also had mystical experiences of all kinds, like Heidi was describing, visitation from the dead, we're all rational people. I'm a rational person. I'm a rational person who has a super rational experience. It doesn't negate my rationality. It just means that I'm bigger than that. And that there are more of us out there who have credentials to show that you can be a spiritual person and an intellect at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. You're not some kind of nut if you talk about how you got a visitation. You're not. You know. I'm hoping that the 21st century is the century where science sees the soul scientifically somehow. We find the location of consciousness is outside the body. We prove that. I know there's some research that's shown that in the last year. I think this is the one chance we have for the actual awakening that we've all been waiting for. All driven by science. Am I out of time? I feel like I am.
Peter, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your sharing, for your story. It's not easy. It's not easy to share. And one of the most powerful aspects of sharing our stories is that, you know, there is a perception out there that many have that mystical, near-death experiences, exceptional human experiences, etc., are all love and light. And it's not the truth.
It's not the truth.
To experiences, you understand the complexity, particularly as a human being, having these experiences and the integration and the complexity of integration that has to take place, even if the essence of the experience is one thing, but the dealing with it as a human being then on planet Earth can be something else entirely. As you have so eloquently shared with us. And there are so many directions we can go with this conversation, Peter. We will end our recording so we can have a group discussion, but I would love to highlight one particular piece that stood out for me from what you shared, that, you know, people who have these experiences come back with insights, and it might take us some time to find the language around that, particularly because these experiences are beyond form and language and time. But one thing you said that really stood out to me there was you realized in the midst of your experience that humanity was made to cause pain to each other. That is a profound insight that we could spend a lot of time on, but, you know, in the interest of time in the group having a say, we'll go there next. But I just wanted to say thank you for that insight, because these are the diamonds that come out of these experiences that give humans, in, as you so wonderfully described there, with veils of forgetfulness, that give us something to contemplate, and whether it is in order to remember, to understand more deeply, but these are the diamonds that come through that, you know, are very meaningful. So thank you, Peter.
I can add one last thing, is that this is the gift that keeps on giving. I've forgotten far more than I remember. I know that I've forgotten it. That much I know. But the more I pursue it, not only do I become more integrated in the world, which is a hard thing to do, and I'm still in the process, especially after my second trip. I'm sure you're in the same boat. Um, but the more I look inside myself, the more I see, the more I remember what I saw over my lifetime. So little bits keep showing up. That's it.
Beautiful. I can see our co-facilitator, Neela. Do you have some wrapping words you would like to say, Neela, as we wrap our recorded segment?
Yes, again, a big thank you, Peter. That was a wonderful presentation. I so enjoyed it. So much food for thought in what you were offering, and such depth. So thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome. Glad to share. It's my job.
We look forward to welcoming you in person one day in sunny Sydney, Peter.
I trip to Adelaide, though. I gotta get down to Adelaide. I want to be in Sydney, but I gotta get down to Adelaide. I have family down there.
Oh, well, so we will see you on this side of the world sometime soon.
Yes. Yes.
In this lifetime. Thank you so much, Peter.